Don't you know that etymologically, radical actually means to go back to the roots of something?
Whenever we talk about going back, I just have a sort of instinctual negative gut reaction to that. All right, well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Owls at Dawn. We are just two dudes from Southern California who studied philosophy, politics, and religion around the world and decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit with impunity. I am Austin Hayden Smith.
And I'm Troy Polidori.
And we're going to have some fun today talking about the Enlightenment and other shit like that. But, yeah, let's not get too ahead of ourselves.
Our first segment, as always, is the Shitty Minute. This is where one of us rants about whatever is grinding our gears this week. And Austin, I can tell you're prepared because you're literally holding a beer right now while you're about to speak into the mic and give us your Shitty Minute. So have at it.
Yeah, my Shitty Minute is actually something that isn't going to be revolutionary, but it's something that is a little bit more visceral for me now after my Paddy's Day weekend experience. And it has to do with how I think that cities are fucking terrible. And I think we should all just move to the beautiful green countryside of various places around the world. And if it's just desert, then we need to figure out how to terraform those fucking places and enrich their soil so that everything can just be beautiful sheeplands. Because I experienced some motherfucking peace like I have never experienced in my life this past weekend when I was in the beautiful country hills of Galway and then Mayo County here in Ireland. Holy fuck, man. I think cities make us into terrible human beings. I was out with Kira and we were walking in these fucking sheep fields and she looked at me at one point and she was like, I have never seen you this happy. And I didn't even feel that happy. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah, like you are so at peace. I was pretty much disconnected from my phone. And I had some emails that I had to exchange every now and then for some work shit. But other than that, I was mostly just present in the fields, playing with dogs and sheep and going on ATVs, going out into these wild springs and there's waterfalls and, oh, fuck, man, cities are terrible. And I fancied myself for a really long time like a city boy. I've lived in cities, big cities. And I've lived like right in the hearts of those cities. And I like culture and I like museums and I like going to the theater and I like going to concerts and shit like that. But you know what, man? I'm trading that all in and I'm going to become a fucking sheep farmer. So fuck the cities and praise the countryside. That's what I'm going to say. And I'm sick of cities. All this shit like urban ecology. Fuck that shit, man. Fuck urban ecology. It's about like green sheep ecology. That's what I'm going to be into from now on. So that's my Shitty Minute. Fuck cities. It's all about the country.
T-minus 1 week or 2 weeks until either your Shitty Minute or Sticky Leaves is about how much you want to be back around people in the city again.
Well, listen, I have often said that I'm a walking contradiction, and I'm a meta-modernist, so it's both and all the time, right? So thank you, Seth Abramson. I have converted. Now, there was something, man. It was absolutely amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And then it's tough because I'm in a pretty big city right now. I'm in Bristol, England right now, actually with Michael from This Week in Hip Hop. And it's a rad city. It's a great city. It's got all kinds of cool bars and coffee shops and barber shops and pubs. And it's got a great little music scene. And Michael's runs some improv comedy troupes here. And so there's like great comedy and theater performances. And all that is great. I fucking dig it. But at the same time, I honestly think, even though everybody in my life tells me that I am crazy and that I would only last a few weeks, I honestly think that I could do it, man, that I could just simplify and become a country bumpkin. I could do it.
You're going to literally like enact Into the Wild in your own life and not realize it until you've been eaten by wolves out somewhere in the wilderness.
Well, thankfully, in Ireland, they just have foxes, and I'll kick a fucking fox in the head, okay? You think that fucker's going to take me down? I'll beat that bitch with a stick.
Dude, you know, I don't know why I remember this, but I think one of the first ever, you know those surveys you took in high school where they told you what your skills were and what your future career should be?
Yeah.
It wasn't one in high school because this is too ridiculous for that, but somehow it's cemented in my mind that I was, based on my personality, supposed to become a Sherpa.
How could that even be an option?
I know, right? But I've always like thought, yeah, it's pretty cool, man. I could do that. I could be a Sherpa.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are kind of small, but I might be a little too tall for that. But I kind of love that life.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this book by Rebecca Solnit, and I can't remember what it's called right now, but it's about walking. And I've been really interested in this idea of the philosophy of walking because I was in LA one day and I was driving down the streets of Hollywood, and all of a sudden the tire tread just got insanely loud. And I realized that I had to turn up my radio probably 5 notches, 7 notches higher than I needed to when I was on just regular, suburban streets or regular city streets, just so that I could hear the music in a way that was relatively clear. And then I started looking at the cars all around us, and they're all honking and yelling at each other. And I started thinking about the sort of unconscious affective, the sort of unconscious affect that would have on our neuronal processing and on our embodied consciousness as we're kind of flowing through these cityscapes. And I started thinking about how I just don't know if our bodies have had time to adapt to that yet, because we have 100,000 plus years of adaptation to a relatively calm material environment or set of material environments. And then all of a sudden we have these booming post-industrial cityscapes. And I just don't know that our bodies are quite yet adjusted to that. And not only that, but then the speed at which cars are moving and the speed at which travel takes place and then the speed at which the market demands that we accomplish tasks and that we relate to certain people and certain things. And so I've just been wondering about this idea of using walking as a metaphor for sort of slowing down and kind of becoming more attuned, if you will, to the material environment. And I don't mean that in a naturalist sense and that like you go out into the woods, because I don't believe in nature. I think that all matter is worked matter in the sort of Marxian, post-Marxian, or really the Sartrean sense. So, but I just mean this idea of attuning ourselves to the sort of slower rhythms of the material environments in a way that is more conducive to the actual rhythms of our biological and psychobiological, I should say, rhythms. And so, I don't know, man, being out in the sheep fields was fucking fantastic. I just felt like I found the rhythms a little bit better. It was lovely.
Have you seen that movie in the mid-90s with Tim Robbins? I think it's called Noise.
No.
He's in New York City, and car alarms are going off, 24/7. And he decides he's fed up and can't take it anymore, and so he takes a baseball bat and beats the shit out of the car when the alarm goes off. And then he basically puts a hoodie on, and does it all over town and becomes like a local superhero for stopping the noise. It's a fantastic movie. It's like no one's ever heard of it apparently, but it was great.
No.
And it got me thinking a lot about this issue of like kind of like the psychopathology of everyday life kind of thing, where we have all this noise, right? And that the level of anxiety it probably produces in us because of the sensory overload. Since for millennia, we've had very little noise to have to sort through. And all of a sudden we have this extreme uptick in the amount of noise at all times, especially if you live in the city. And not just the amount of anxiety that would cause, even if you're not prone to it, I think would be, it's got to be extreme, right?
Yeah, and it's an unconscious anxiety that I think people just become attuned to, or they become, I guess they sort of just embody, and it's a state of anxiety that becomes normalized. And I don't know that is the best way to stimulate human flourishing. I don't know, But then again, maybe I am just full of shit, and maybe I am just destined to be an attention-starving city boy. But I don't think so. I really don't think so. So
you can be both, yo. I give you permission.
Okay. Well, I figure in the age of the internet, as long as I have access to culture and access to the city, then I think I would be okay if 80% of my time or 70% of my time was lived in much more of a quiet environment. I think I'd get down with that.
Yeah, I feel you.
Yep. All right, sweet. So, moving on, let's go into our main segment for the week this week. And this week, Troy and I are going to be chatting about something that has been relevant in a couple of various, I guess we would say, prominent publications, and that people have been talking about quite a bit through social media. I know it was all over Twitter. I don't know if it was elsewhere. Troy, you might know better than I. But we are going to talk about this claim that has been made by a couple of scholars and then various others that have supported their initial proposition that we ought to go back to the Enlightenment. And I guess Troy and I are going to discuss exactly what they meant by that, what that means, and whether or not we think that's a good fucking idea. Troy, how do you want to jump into this conversation?
Yeah, I guess a little bit more context could be helpful. We originally had discussed maybe doing this episode based around some of Dan Dennett's remarks about postmodern philosophy influencing the alt-right and the fake news and post-truth ideas. We'd already kind of done a post-truth episode, but not dealing specifically with these claims about postmodern philosophies allegedly influencing this or causing it or being to blame for this. But I think we just kind of talked about it and said, these things are so stupid, what's the point of even discussing it? Like Dennett's entire shtick on this is like, I don't know, it's a caricature of the whole thing.
Yeah, and what did he say? He made some remark that was something about whenever politics gets involved, I want nothing to do with it, or something along those lines. What was the claim? Remember?
He literally says, I hate thinking and talking about politics. It's a waste of time, but I'm going to do it for the next however many paragraphs.
Yeah.
Way to show some confidence and or to sort of lure people in to want to listen to you.
Right.
But that said, there was a Jacobin article, I believe last week or the week before, titled Aliens, Anti-Semitism, and Academia by Landon Frim and Harrison Fluss. And it's an article about the alt-right kind of scholar. I don't know if he's scholar-in-chief or just one of the people they cite for a lot of the philosophical underpinnings. And that's Jason Reza Giorgiani. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it exactly correctly, but that's sounds about right. And I guess he went to Stony Brook, which is a pretty well-known liberal continental philosophy rich department in philosophy.
One of the better continental philosophy departments in the United States.
Yeah, and in an area where full of other major continental philosophy departments. So It's certainly not like it's isolated in the University of Chicago economics or something. But and he certainly is not the sort of the leftist political bent that most continental philosophy usually finds itself wading around in. And that's a somewhat interesting phenomenon because it's just not what you'd expect, having read a lot of, Derrida, Foucault, and Deleuze. You don't expect someone with, alt-right views to be reading that stuff and finding anything in there that's effective. But seems like that's happening now. That's a real thing. And so I think, discussing it a little bit, the leftist call to reject a lot of this 20th century post-structuralist and postmodern philosophy and return to the Enlightenment ideas of rationality and universality and all this. Yeah. It's kind of it's starting to be more than just a once in a while kind of thing. We're hearing it from a lot of different sources now, it seems like. Jacobin and Dan Dennett are not in league with each other.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, I think I'm actually not surprised that there is this correlation between postmodern skepticism to meta-narrative and the alt-right, because many individuals that are self-described on the alt-right, it is that skepticism to certain, what they see as certain oppressive power structures, certain hegemonic regimes that they have a problem with, that they see that need to be contested. And so in that sense, I kind of get it. There's like this almost dispositional, there's this dispositional relation with some of, I guess, what postmodernity was doing or trying to do or does in that sense. So from that perspective, I kind of had that inclination prior to all this hubbub being stirred up that the alt-right kind of was the sort of postmodern because it's not conservative. So we'll say it was this postmodern, non-leftist response to what they view as being a sort of hegemony of oppressive liberalism. And I mean that in the American sense of liberal, not in the classical sense. And so So from that, I see where someone like Giorgiani or certain individuals that are on like the NRX or the Dark Enlightenment or on the alt-right side, I see where they're coming from. But with that said, I'm very skeptical of the claim that we need to go back to the Enlightenment. Actually, so a friend of mine, one of the co-writers of the documentary that I'm working on, Alex Williams, said it just very simply on Twitter. He said, "Don't you think we can do better than going back to the Enlightenment?" And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think there was a disposition and an impulse that we can sympathize with, that made the Enlightenment and that continues to make the Enlightenment something worthwhile for consideration. But at the same time, to go back to that, to just simply sort of like praise rationality and the triumph of the individual and the turn to the self and all of these things that the Enlightenment is generally understood as being an expression of, I just don't know that, first of all, that we can ever do that, especially on this side of skepticism, after the turn to language and things of that sort and sort of understanding of the unconscious. I just don't know, after post-Marxian, post-Freudian, and post-structuralist thought, I don't know if you can go back to the Enlightenment in any sort of authentic sense. I think if you did so, you would automatically be bringing in nostalgia and would therefore be creating a sort of serial environment that would only stifle the possibilities for genuine political transformation moving forward.
Yeah, it does strike me as somewhat ironic in the Alanis Morissette sense that Jacobin, which is a publication that I really like and enjoy and produces great stuff. And this is even an article that we're talking about because it's somewhat well thought out and interesting. Usually is always about positing some futural vision. And if it takes stuff from the past, it's in order to use it for some, imagined, more proper, better, more egalitarian usage in the future. And to talk about returning to the Enlightenment rather than something using the Enlightenment, certain ideas maybe, to come up with something better than that. It seems like a classic kind of false alternatives to me, that it's either the Enlightenment or it's just utter cesspool of irrationality and, waiting around in it and assuming that's the best life can be, is your irrationality versus my irrationality, which is like, it does not have to be one or the other.
Right.
At the same time, we also have to kind of talk about what is the Enlightenment that we're talking about. There's a bit of an equivocation here in my mind between the spirit of the Enlightenment, which is, Kant's dare to know, right? The sense of critique of religion, critique of establishment, critique of institutions that are traditional, things like that, and the sort of specific effects of the Enlightenment, the historical effects, which is the things that usually we're more afraid of, or we're more sort of negative towards, like colonialism, institutionalized racism, misogyny, very real things. It's absolutely true that the Enlightenment did a lot of great things in sort of getting us away from this reliance upon traditional religion as the only source of knowledge, and also used a lot of those tools for rampant misogyny and racism at the same time. Like, those are both true.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. So what I wonder is this article actually making that second move, the move that it's trying to recapture the sort of, let's say, the material tendencies, or is it trying to say that no, it's the spirit or the form of the Enlightenment that we ought to reclaim? So first of all, like, is the article, which move is the article making?
Well, I don't think it's making that distinction is the problem. Because if we've read a lot of Foucault, and Foucault even wrote a what is Enlightenment kind of response and critique of Kant, to Kant's what is Enlightenment. And Foucault kind of names himself and this kind of new spirits of critique as just a sort of newer kind of Enlightenment. In the same way Kant was doing this with religion and tradition and aristocracy and things like that, Foucault was doing it with the other areas that Kant didn't do it with. He's doing Enlightenment to the Enlightenment, which is very much in the spirit of the Enlightenment. So if you see these kind of 20th century philosophers, and we've talked about previously, like on the metamodernism episode, with Derrida and Foucault, and these ones who get lambasted for being, irrational or not having any standards of rationality or particularity over universality. They very much, there's certain points of those thinkers that I don't like very much, but they saw themselves, I think, very much in the line with Kant and the sense of Enlightenment critique, just more broad and more sort of pointed than Kant was, right?
Yeah. So there's a failure to make that distinction in the article, but you think that distinction is crucial if we're going to have this discussion about the Enlightenment. And I'm assuming that you would say the actual material tendencies or the specifics or the instantiations of the Enlightenment aren't something that we ought to reproduce, but rather that the spirit of the Enlightenment, the dare to know in the Kantian sense, is something that we ought to try to replicate, or if not replicate, reproduce under different historical conditions.
Yeah, I mean, certainly my tendency is to think in the same way Foucault did that to the effects of the Enlightenment, like colonialism and racism and things like that, and the order of things, and in his various studies of power. We can continue that tradition by opening up that sense of critique to the new areas that need it the most, that are most cemented in our own societies. Like that, if we're going to call back to Enlightenment, then it's kind of always been happening, just in different guises. I don't know, do you think that's is that too much of like a unitary reading? Am I not looking for the differences and seeing only the similarities here?
No, I agree with you. I think for me, I agree that the article does not make an appropriate distinction, but it simply seems to infer that we can just simply go back to the rationality of the Enlightenment, and I think that there's a problem in that. But I agree with you. For me, I like to speak of, I guess I would say, I say it a lot, and I feel like it's because I'm still trying to work through the vocabulary that is the most effective, but I talk about a disposition, a logical disposition, or a paradigm of thought. And I feel like if your disposition is in league with the spirit of the Enlightenment, then that's something that I think is good to maintain. That's something that we ought to continue to work out and continue to develop. But I don't think that has any relation to the language of going back to anything. I don't know that we ought to go back to anything. I think we ought to just continue to focus forward. And there's always going to be a sense in which the past is present in the present. There's always going to be a sense in which the past is reproduced in the future, in all of the images that we project. But for some reason, I get that sort of an intuitive negative reaction when I hear that we ought to go back to something, because to me, what that does is that imposes a sort of limiting and limited scope or set of parameters on which we're able to theorize and think about new potential forms of existence and living. And I don't mean that within the paradigm of a sort of simple notion of progress that the Enlightenment would put forward, as though there's a telos, that there is a specific end, because I don't think that there is a specific end. But the point is that rather than being compelled from without because there is an end that we're trying to realize, it's about the transformation of the disposition that wells from this sort of source that is purely springing from the well. And where is it shooting? Well, we don't really know, but it's dispersing into these unbounded potential futures. And we create as we kind of keep welling forth, in a sense, to kind of keep belaboring the metaphor. And so whenever we talk about going back, I just have a sort of instinctual negative gut reaction to that. And I think that's my problem with all of this. So for me, I agree with you that it is absolutely about this daring to know that comes through Kant all the way through Foucault, and that in their material tendencies, Kant's daring to know is different than Foucault's daring to know. It's different than Deleuze's daring to know. It's different than Seth Abramson's daring to know. But what I think is interesting is that there's this dispositional similarity that we can only understand maybe abstractly, but that's what I'm interested in. But ultimately, again, it's not about finding things from the outside that we take on, but rather it's about just this, it's like the sun that just bursts forth from its core perpetually, and that the genesis of that creation is internal rather than externally derived.
Well, Austin, I'm going to put on my fedora. I'm going to swish around my fifth of whiskey. I'm going to stroke my neckbeard, and I'm going to say, don't you know that etymologically, radical actually means to go back to the roots of something?
Yeah, thank you, John Milbank and Radical Orthodoxy guys.
Thank you for picking that up.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, radix does mean the root, doesn't it? It does. It does. And again, this is, I guess, where I would say, I guess I just don't really care about the history of a word. You know?
Thank you.
I don't really give a shit what it meant historically, you know?
The etymological purists, that's a new level of annoying.
Yeah, I don't give a fuck, man. So
well, okay, let me give a more serious what I think might be the critique here, and I think the article kind of mentions it a little bit, and they quote I think it was Lukács who said that there's a tendency in the 20th century towards marrying left ethics with right epistemology. Mm-hmm. What they mean is the left ethics of egalitarianism and progress and these kind of things, but no longer with the seemingly left epistemology of universal reason and emancipatory reason and logic, and away from tradition and particularism, and a move towards right epistemology, which they make a case, and I think this actually bears out pretty well. The tradition of right epistemology usually is particularistic. It's focusing on tradition, which is not universal. Tradition is located in a space and time, and is limited. And I think it is right to place your Hamann and your Jacobi and your a few of those kind of romantic German philosophers that were reacting against the anti-Enlightenment figures as being somewhat more conservative in that sense for the time. And that this marrying of left ethics of universality, egalitarianism, with right epistemology, particularism, anti-universality, things like that, sets the stage for this new sort of version of anti-Enlightenment in the guise of the alt-right, which is all about recovering certain traditions. It's anti-universalistic. It's, in many cases, pro-colonial, but not because of the Enlightenment ideals, and kind of a weird switcheroo. But I think the worry would be if we just want to have these as unbounded forms of thought and no sort of fencing around some universal idea of what constitutes, good reasons and justice, things like this, then basically you're just opening up the floodgates and anybody can present anything they want, and no one can sort of argue in sort of a governed space of reasons about what counts as reasonable, rational, and what's not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the same critiques, or similar critique, I'll say, that we heard about the dangers of postmodernism when we were in a conservative evangelical environment. If you don't have a standard, and if everything is just open to interpretation or cultural relativism or whatever, then you don't really have a position from which you can make a sort of absolute judgment, and people are afraid of that. I don't know. I guess I'm not afraid of that. I'm kind of okay with that, because to me, it's ultimately about cooperative power in a positive sense, since I think everything is about power. So it's okay if there are these crazy different ideas. There are always going to be crazy different ideas. I mean, I'm going to use a metaphor in nature, but there are always going to be like the predators that are trying to eat the other animals. But that's cool. Let's just band together and figure out how to not let those predators destroy our flock, if that makes sense. So I'm not so concerned with the sort of purity of trying to stamp out these ideas as much as I am about figuring out pragmatically how to just defeat them.
Okay. Now, we did go to a conservative evangelical institution, and they were very anti the postmodern culture that was infecting America and American universities at the time. But then there were a couple of people who had actually read the so-called postmodern philosophers, the Derrida, the Foucault, and they actually found that this is actually really great for evangelicalism, because now we can say all the irrational stuff we want and no one can tell us it's wrong.
Yeah.
And that I thought was the most surprising part of it, because they were the ones who had actually read this stuff. The rest of the, the troglodytes, they never read this stuff. They didn't give a shit.
Right.
They just saw people having sex and not feeling bad about it. So they wanted to make sure that, they told you it was wrong. So this is, I think, the more similar point. Not that Giorgiani and the alt-right is similar to, the evangelical sort of marriage to postmodernism, which is slowly happening, I guess, maybe only in university circles and like emergent circles, but it was kind of happening. That strikes me as, well, then what do you say at that point? Because if it's just a bunch of people fighting over their own personal tradition against yours, and it's just about pragmatically trying to defeat them, do we give up on this entire idea of critique? Because it feels to me like, even though Foucault and Derrida, especially Foucault, wants to sort of move away from universality, and he very conspicuously doesn't ever define what power really is. He just analyzes it in its little discrete occurrences. There's a sense in which it's going somewhere. Like, it's a torpedo and it has a direction. He famously doesn't want to say what the direction is, but it is going somewhere. Like, there seems to be maybe not a telos that you have set, but it's directed.
Yeah, there are flows, and there are cumulative flows that habitually flow in certain directions as more power structures cling on to particular flows against other flows. And so then it feels like those other flows that are anti-flows are still being magnetically dragged along with the more dominant flows. But I'm going to say something that might sound a little bit weird, but remember Cornelius Van Til's famous sort of presuppositional statement that all reason is circular reason. And you would hear this a lot of times from certain apologists, Christian apologists, that all reason is circular reason. I kind of am cool with that. Not in the way that they mean it, because for them, they would say all reason is circular reason, and then they would just hold up the Bible and they'd smack you in the face with it, and then hope that the Spirit like moved in your heart. But I'm going to kind of do something, but in a non-Christian sense. I would say, I'm okay with the fact that maybe we don't have to be able to appeal to these universalizable truths, but rather what we need to do is be analytical, be critical, deconstruct, genealogically and archaeologically analyze these opinions that we view as being damaging to human flourishing. And then at the same time, hold up a positive vision, something that is going to appeal to people on an empathic and at a visceral level. And we don't know what those positive visions are going to be tomorrow or the next day, but I know what some of them might be right now, like the idea of genuine human connection. People want that. The idea that people have enough food to eat. People want that. The idea that people can pursue passions or interests. I think some people want that. Now, is that a perfect final goal? No, because maybe even that is too wedded to a sort of colonial tradition based on, capitalism and the sort of spread of democratic Western liberal ideas. But nevertheless, as of right now, I think it's a pragmatic placeholder that we can use to at least benefit certain people now, to pull them out of certain situations that would be less appealing. And then maybe tomorrow, somebody and a group of individuals figure out what better positive visions would be. And maybe it's that we all go to fucking sheep farms and we all become sheep farmers, But the point is that we're constantly recreating what those positive visions are. And at the same time, our analysis and our criticism is constantly shifting. And all we have to worry about is being true and being committed to that analysis, which is that dispositional thing that I was talking about earlier. And then at the same time, also concerning ourselves with how is it that we can continue to better seek human community, human flourishing, happiness, not only for us, but also for our ecosystems and for the environment, et cetera, et cetera. And so in that sense, it is a sort of presuppositional thing. It isn't about saying that's wrong and this is right, but it's just simply about saying, let's say that we're going to analyze this and talk about the problems of this, and then let's also at the same time hold up these better visions and hope that by holding up those better visions, that's going to spark some people to life.
I'll say this about the Van Tillian claim, the presuppositionalist claim. Yeah, sure, it's all circles, but not all circles are virtuous circles.
That's true. Right.
Some are absolutely vicious, and they're enclosed, and they're purposed for the intention of excluding other people based upon nothing but sort of emotional affects and, what we'd call in political circles just straight up bigotry, right? that was very clear. If you the entire claim that the Van Til was using was basically so they could say the Bible is the end point and beginning point of our circle, and so you can't critique it because we just accept it. Like that's not acceptable because there's many other sort of nodes on that circle that contradict that, and so that's not going to make any sense. It's going to lead to a epistemological crisis for anybody who wants to actually try to think of it, and that leads to a not good life, which is a huge problem in a vicious circle. So, and I'm going to say the same thing about, like Giorgiani and others who want to sort of enclose themselves in a shelter and say that, well, you know what, because of this this new kind of post-structuralist and postmodern philosophy, I can believe phrenology is real. Now, they don't say that, but like, for example, or I'm going to say that colonialism is good for non-white people. And I'm going to say that, people in Iran, in the ancient Iran, were white, and whatever the hell else he's going to say. Like it's not oppressive or Enlightenment, universality, authoritarianism to say that's just straight up wrong. It's a vicious circle and it gets you nowhere effectively. And that, maybe we're not going to go so far as to say that we have some sort of Enlightenment universality and absolute connection to the real in promoting some perfect, ideal, Platonic, just society. But we're going to say that we can have better circles than others.
Yes, but that's what I think is important, is we need to make sure that we're not saying that we do have that absolute standard, that ontological absolute standard that is the foundation upon which we're building our criticism, right?
If we mean by absolute, do you mean like it's connected to the real, like a sense of is begets ought?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down with that. I'm going to follow Hume and say you can't make the connection. It's a naturalistic fallacy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think that means that we have to give up talking about the ought in a way that tries to seek some sense of truth, of betterment, that there's some are superior than others.
Yeah.
I think you can do that and not have to just say, well, you know what? You do you, and I do me. And if yours is racist, what the hell am I going to do about it?
Sure. And I hope it wasn't coming across that I was kind of saying, oh, what's good for you is good for you. What's right for me is right for me. That's not what I meant, because I clearly want to say that we ought to be able to criticize. That's why there has to be both that criticism and that positive vision. But I think I'm just trying to make sure that I navigate very closely between that idea and then at the same time not falling into what these guys are talking about, which is that you have to have a sort of understanding of what is true and what is right and what is good in an ultimate sense, because that then leads to certain dogmatic problems that I also want to reject.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't saying that you were saying that. I'm just, okay. I kind of understand that the worry on, like this article that we're talking about with Jacobin, is that we said it's kind of a false alternative, maybe a little slippery slope there, but it is worrying that if we go down that road, then basically we're just going to tell those in the alt-right that you have every right to say what you want and believe it, and it's totally correct, but we're going to be over here doing our little thing. Right. And like, I do think that's if you end up down that road, which I don't think anybody really does, but if you do, then you kind of give up the ghost. Like, it's at that point, what's even the vision? There's nothing for people to grab onto and say, yeah, I want to have some futural good thing.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think that it is difficult to think through, and that a lot of people would have a hard time thinking through, okay, so if it isn't going back to the Enlightenment, and if we don't have some sort of absolute standard by which we can make a judgment against this alt-right sort of appropriation of postmodernism, then what do we have? And I think you get a lot of that in contemporary popular liberal political discourse, where they just are up in arms against the alt-right because everything they're doing is a violation of the Constitution, or that Donald Trump he's committing treason and all of this stuff. And I get it, but what they're doing a lot of times is they're just appealing to some sort of old nostalgic standard or an old meta-narrative that is American supremacy means such and such, not what the alt-right people want to believe in. So we got to go back to what is true. And that, I think, is a strange thing. And that, I think, is what is really, because it's so popular, I think it becomes really effective in changing how people think. And so I think being able to think through, to kind of navigate between these two kind of ditches that you could fall into, one being the sort of, well, you just do you, and the other being, no, we have to go back to the Enlightenment. We need to kind of figure out a different way to think through this complex issue. And unfortunately, popular news discourse is not capable of doing that for all kinds of reasons. But I think that then affects just popular discourse in general. So that's why I think this type of discussion is really important, you know?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm glad you brought it back to the current political scene, because that's sort of what I'm seeing the most of right now, what I'm most interested in kind of analyzing and using this sense of critique and evaluation on. And it's that the left seems to only really care about this kind of really microscopic sense of power. Like, if we just impeach Trump, then, sorry, I said his name. We almost got all the way through. 45. If we just impeach the guy, then we'll have won. And, you know, some people are racist out there, but you can't do anything about that because they're just racist. So we just have to call them deplorables and forget about it. And, you know, eventually demographics will, like, that's our big hope, is that eventually our isolated particularist community will be bigger than theirs, and so we'll win. And it's like, nah, you're never going to win like that. You have to have some sense in which you have a vision for a better future, and that it's persuasive, and you can win people over. It's this weird sense that, like, people have these racist ideologies, so they're bigoted, and that's like the uncaused cause of everything, their thoughts. It's like, bro, people's thoughts are caused by things. Yeah, they're one node in a huge web, and people that are racist out there are racist mostly because they're pissed off. And sometimes when people are pissed off, they're given tools to be pissed off at minorities and black people and immigrants and women by those in power who would rather not be critiqued themselves. Just to have a vision of critique like that, to understand that's what's happening, and to then present a better future even to those people, that seems to me like the only road that's going to be effective. Not this whole, like, let's bunker down in our little silos and hope that we win in the end.
Yeah, and I've heard a bunch of similar analyses come out of the Netherlands ever since their election this past week, where, you know, the big fear was that Wilders or Wilders was gonna pick up enough seats to get his party in power. And then a couple of my friends who are actually Dutch, they were talking about how, look, even if he does get the seats, he's not going to have the numbers to be able to affect serious policy change. They said, but that's not the point. The point is that what's happened is all the other conservative parties have capitulated on many of these same sort of xenophobic and nationalistic ideals that Wilders or Wilders, whatever his name is, that him and his party have put forth. And you see something similar happening with Le Pen in France, and something similar happening with the Republican Party in the States, and now in the UK with the Tory Party and the sort of Brexit campaign. So it's the fact of, and I know this term gets used so much, but it's the normalization of these sort of more dangerous neo-nationalist or neo-fascist ideals that are embedding themselves and becoming normalized within the other parties that aren't the crazy parties, right? The quote-unquote crazy parties. And so in the battle of the cultural war, so to speak, if you will, it does seem that you can't just sit down and hunker down in your silos, because there is an affective spread that is infectious of this type of neo-nationalist or neo-fascist ideal that is something that does need to be confronted. It's just, how do we confront it? Do we confront it by holding up the Enlightenment, or do you confront it in another way? And there's got to be another way. There's got to be a better way, a way that isn't nostalgic, that isn't conservative, that isn't limiting and limited in its paradigm, but that rather is open-ended, and that has a potency and a power that bursts forth from this well of creativity and optimism and experimentation and pragmatism as we move forward. And that is something that I would not be able to articulate, but that's something that I would seek to continue to learn to articulate.
Yeah, and even add in that it's totally fine to be inspired by things in the past, like the Enlightenment, and to divorce the spirit of it in critique from some of the effects, which are themselves limiting and bounded, and to see a through line from that all the way to today, of figures of critique of the dominant status quo. and to see oneself in that line. You kind of do have to have some sense of a historical vision to see how you got to where you are and what you might do. You just have to kind of creatively reimagine yourself in that history. You're the newest moment in the dialectic of history. So you can change even what the past is at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's actually really lovely. I like that. You can even change what the past is. Yeah, 100%, man. All right, well, do you have any concluding thoughts on this?
Nah, fuck Donald Trump.
Fuck Donald Trump. Isn't there, there's that song? I heard it like 10 times last night.
Yeah,
Fuck
yeah.
Donald Trump. FDT.
FDT, but also more than that. Creatively reimagine the future beyond FDT.
All right, sweet. So moving on to the next segment, we are going to transition to the sticky leaves portion of the podcast. This is the segment where one of us gets to talk about whatever it is that is giving us meaning in a world that is often devoid of meaning. This week it is Troy's turn to talk about values in a valueless, dark, materialist void. Troy, what up?
I'm keeping my sticky leaves short this week because it's pretty simple.
Okay.
I'm just watching the fuck out of Legion right now.
Oh, yeah.
You watch the show on FX?
I haven't watched it yet.
It is so good. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I watched a television show, and I literally had no idea what was going to happen next. Like, just absolutely no idea. It could go one of 50 million different strains. I'm only about 5 episodes in. I think I might be an episode or 2 behind with what's going on right now. But for those who don't know, Legion is a show on FX. Creator is Noah Hawley. He's the guy who did the Fargo television series on FX as well, which is an amazing and fantastic show as well. And it's actually a Marvel property, which when I hear that, I run from my gun because I don't want to watch anything to do with superheroes ever again at this point. But you could watch the show not knowing it's about a Marvel property and never figure it out. There's a couple of Easter eggs here and there mentioned, but it has basically nothing to do with the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe or whatever the hell it's called. It's about a dude who I guess he's a mutant in the sense that he has some telekinetic and telepathic powers, but we're not entirely sure what causes them and the extent of them or any of that stuff. He's just very powerful and doesn't even know his own power. And a couple different groups are fighting over him, and he's realizing his powers. Probably half the show seems to happen inside of his mind. Like, literally, it's placed inside of his mind. And Noah Hawley is really, really interesting in creating visuals, and his crew as well. And I mean, it's such a cool show to watch because the visuals are amazing. Even though it's a TV show and their budget's limited, it's visually really interesting and cool. And it's like a total mind trip for half of every episode, practically. The guy who plays the main character, David, who's Legion, he's actually, I think his name is Dan Stevens. He's the Beast in the new Beauty and the Beast live-action remake, which I did not realize at first, but that threw me off a bit. He's fantastic in it. He kind of can go from this polarized, dark, menacing, I have more power than all of you and I will fuck your shit up, to lighthearted and kind and loving and weak, vulnerable child because I'm suffering from the powers that I can't quite grasp. He plays these polar opposites so well, and the rest of the cast is excellent too. Aubrey Plaza, I don't want to say too much about it because you should just watch the show, but her character is completely fucking nuts and it's really cool. I get really happy when I watch a show and it just kind of throws me for a loop. Not everything it does is perfect or the most interesting thing. It's not like you're watching The Wire and you're like, oh my god, this is epic, dramatic television, and I feel like I'm watching something super important. Right. But it's totally just creative and not the kind of thing you would expect to find on the cable channel. In addition to being done very well, technical expertise and all that, I'm just thankful so much that there's still people out there who want to just kind of, make cool shit. It doesn't have to be super important. It just has to be creative and interesting. And you get lost for an hour, not realizing the time has gone by. At the end, you're like, what the fuck just happened? I love that feeling.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie, though. I am really scared for you, Troy. You're only 5 episodes in. I'm afraid that it's going to get like super comic booky. Or if it doesn't this season because Noah Hawley's still at the helm, what happens next season? And then you're going to be completely, the rug's just going to be pulled out from underneath you.
If it does that, I'll have a shitty minute in the future about it.
Okay.
I'm pretty confident it's not going to happen, though, because I've read some interviews with Noah Hawley, and he specifically mentioned that he sold FX on the idea that this is a Marvel property and they had to buy it from Marvel, but it's going to have basically nothing to do with the rest of the universe.
Awesome.
And so it's going to be its own isolated story.
Is it going to be a sort of predetermined run like a lot of other shows are coming out where they say it's only going to be 4 seasons or it's only going to be 5 seasons or something like that? Because he's not doing Fargo anymore, right? They did their 2 seasons and then they're done?
No, they're coming back in a couple of months.
Is he at the helm?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's going to do both. Is it going to have a sort of preset sort of open and close, or do we know? Is it going to kind of eventually run into the pitfalls of having to jump the shark and shit like that?
Well, here's the thing. As anything, it might. But I know that Hawley it was in the news last year, after Fargo's second run, I believe, FX kind of realized they had something pretty important on their hands. And so they basically gave him a completely open-ended contract, like similar to the one that they gave Donald Glover. Basically, make cool shit however you want, and we won't tell you what to do. The kind of thing that Netflix has been doing. And so he's basically, I think the reason he was able to make Legion, which is a Marvel property. If you make a Marvel property, they're kind of expecting you to fit into the universe so you can get the ratings from the other stuff. Like, Legion's not doing that well, ratings-wise, I'm pretty sure, because people don't see it as the next Jessica Jones, the next Iron Fist, whatever. Thank God. And that's great, because then he doesn't have that pressure on him to make the show he's supposed to make, but only the show he wants to make. And he's mentioned in interviews that they want to make a show about this character because he's interesting. That's the only reason. Just because he's an interesting character, and the things that happen in his mind are both interesting and very easy to make empathetic for the audience, because he suffers a lot through this stuff. And that's fantastic, and I really hope that continues, because it's kind of a treat. You can do so much with this weird comic book stuff without having to make it fanfare, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's some interesting shit there.
Yeah, when you were first telling me about this, you were, I think, only like 1 episode in, actually, maybe 2 episodes in, and you were like, dude, you gotta fucking check this out. It sounds rad. I'm in. I'm in already. I just haven't had the time yet, but I will. I'm telling you, I'm in. So, all right, that sounds good. Who else is in it? So you got Dan Stevens, Aubrey Plaza. Do we know any other names that people might recognize?
There's a dude that looks like Art Garfunkel. It's not Garfunkel, though. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay.
And
it's not Bradley Whitford. Bradley Whitford kind of looks like Art Garfunkel.
It's not.
Okay.
I don't know any of the actors in it, as far as I can remember.
Okay.
But there's a chick named Syd Barrett, like from Pink Floyd. So that was pretty dope.
Okay.
But, other than that, I don't know anybody else.
Whatever, man. I'm in. That's it. That's all that matters. Check it out. Cool, non-Marvel properties on FX. And FX generally does pretty good shit, too. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so for our next segment, we're going to do some bullshitting. This is where we talk about something that either doesn't matter or that we know nothing about. And I think in this case, it's actually kind of both. Because we're talking about the fact that it seems like Disney is going to remake every animated film they've ever made into a live-action film, no matter how stupid the idea is.
What are they going to do for Lion King?
That might actually be cool. But I hope people are dressing up like lions.
Well, they did that in the stage performance, so I guess they already did that.
It should be that, but, set out into the Sahara Desert or whatever.
Like Warhorse did with their theater production, where the people were in the horse. But they didn't do that when they made the movie. They had real horses. They copped out. Pussies.
It's like with Shakespeare, where men had to play women.
Yeah, people have to play animals.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, man the fuck up if you're going to do this. Have you seen Beauty and the Beast yet?
Yeah, I did see it.
Oh, you say that with like a little bit of trepidation in your voice. How come, Troy?
Oh, not trepidation, more like regret.
Was it regret?
Yeah, I mean,
was it?
It was. Dude, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time like reviewing it. I'm not sure it deserves that, but I'll just say one thing about it.
Okay.
It's way more rapey when there's real people saying this stuff
Really?
than a cartoon. Maybe I just don't
Really?
remember the cartoon as well because I was young and innocent, and like the hegemony of like misogynistic impulses was cemented in my mind already at a young age
Yeah.
when the animated film came out. But it's super rapey in the new one. Like, they
You mean
even
like
tried to skirt around it, and it's still that way.
rapey, like the Beast is rapey?
Yeah, I mean, dude,
And Gaston is
Kidnap-
rapey?
everybody's kind of rapey. Josh Gad's kind of rapey. No, he's
LeFou?
yeah. The whole gay controversy was so stupid. Like, it's
I
even
actually-
less pronounced than the animated film was.
That's what I've heard, actually. I heard that it's actually nothing at all. But that because he said that that's how we're supposed to interpret it, that's how it, like, that's why it has its magnetism, but that actually it is really very benign.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's just someone saying basically Luke Evans is somebody I would be gay for too,
Yeah, I would.
which is what I think anyone is saying when they're saying that.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? When you go back and watch the animated version, I can totally get the homoeroticism that LeFou has a total man crush
It's
on
way more in that.
Gaston. Yeah, totally. So, whatever, man. Plus, I love how everyone's response, at least that was a little bit more sort of critical and cynical of all of this sort of Christian controversy. They're like, yo, so you're concerned about a little bit of homosexuality, but bestiality is all good, right?
Well, it's that straight up Rush Limbaugh that said that, oh no, all the liberals care about is consent. If there's not consent in sex, then the rape police come. You know that? Remember that whole thing? Yeah, they're so worried about homoeroticism, like the vague hint of it. But a dude who kidnaps a woman and refuses to let her leave, and then she falls in love with him because he's actually a nice guy underneath. Like, that's not the most rapey thing you've ever heard in your life.
Yeah, and he looks like a fucking buffalo. Oh, that's cool.
Well, I get that his soul is human.
She doesn't know that.
And honestly, dude, in the animated film, he looks like a beast, like an animal.
Yes.
But in the live action film, it looks like a really hairy dude. Like, it looks like a dude
really?
who might be in, like, the second guitarist in Fleet Foxes.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that sense, I kind of understand that. Yeah, given the fact that beards are in and, hairy stuff is a thing right now in the indie folk community, maybe Belle is down with that.
Yeah, he's lumberjack chic.
Yeah, Gaston is so, like, cut and the jawline, and he's got no facial hair. And Belle's just like, I want some rough and tumble. I want to itch.
That's right.
I want that that itchiness when I'm getting down and getting busy.
That's
so
right.
I don't think the bestiality thing is really all that apparent at all because he's very much human.
He's a dude. Yeah. Okay.
He's
so
just a rapey dude, and that's the problem.
he's just a rapey dude. Yeah, but as long as he's not gay, then it's okay.
Rapey hipsters does not make it okay.
Yeah. Very true. Yeah. Okay. So then, are we thinking that other than Beauty and the Beast, this is just going to happen down like Lady and the Tramp? Are they going to do that?
See, I want to ask, what's the one you want to have adapted into a live action film? The most?
Okay, well here you have to, because my favorite Disney movie, animated Disney movie, is actually Robin Hood. But they've made a shitload of Robin Hood movies, so I don't want to see a Robin Hood. Unless it's literally a shot-for-shot remake, but live action, then I'd be down. I'd be so down.
It's a fox. Did you dress up as a fox?
Oh yeah. Remember that shit?
Mm.
That's what I want to see. But okay, since that won't happen because they've already made a shitload of Robin Hood films.
And could you really make a better film than Men in Tights, honestly?
That's a very good point. I thought you were going to say Prince of Thieves, but yes, point taken. I'm going to have to go. I want to go with something like kind of older, like one of the what was the one? Like The Fox and the Hound. That was a great one. That was one of my favorites. That would be a really cool one. You get like a cool
Lady
fox.
and the Tramp would be hilarious.
Lady and the Tramp would be. Yeah, Lady and the Tramp would be really cool. What else could they do?
How about Aristocats?
Yeah, that'd
I
be
want to
awesome.
see a bunch of cats just with like gold chains and talking about the poors and taking healthcare away from people. Like that'd be hilarious.
That'd be cool. Pinocchio? Could you do Pinocchio?
Haven't they done Pinocchio?
Have they?
I can't remember, dude. Yeah, someone did a Pinocchio, but it was supposed to be horrible. Was it? I think Roberto Benigni, maybe. did one.
Oh, did he?
But I think it was supposed to be atrocious. But dude,
But
a
it was
live
based.
action
It was
Pinocchio could be scary as fuck.
yeah, but it would be based on like the old Pinocchio, right? Not the Disney Pinocchio. I'm talking about like Disney Pinocchio.
Yeah, still, I think you could do it, and it'd be pretty scary.
Yeah,
It's
especially
a pretty
when he
dark
gets
story.
yeah when he gets kidnapped and or he goes onto that island where all the kids are turned into donkeys and shit.
Dude, like, yeah, you could Tim Burton the fuck out of that.
Ooh, that still creeps me out. Yeah. Oh yeah, because Tim Burton did Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, I'm thinking like Fox and the Hound. I love Fox and the Hound. That's a great fucking story. What about you?
Yeah, see,
what do you think?
Disney, let's make the cool stories.
Yeah.
Basically, just have more animals in your movies, I think is the idea. And not like fake animals where it's Dan Stevens who's grown his beard a whole lot. I want to see like some real animals doing shit on screen.
Yeah, and I don't mean like Homeward Bound where Michael J. Fox is voicing some like dopey Labrador, you know?
You didn't just talk shit about Homeward Bound, did you?
I mean, a little bit of shit talking.
That was my movie. That was my.
Was that your jam?
That was my text as a 5-year-old.
And wasn't Roseanne the cat?
Was it? No, I think it was Sally Field.
Are you sure?
Or maybe not. Or Sissy Spacek. One of those. I don't remember who.
Well, it was either, I don't know how we go from Roseanne Barr to Sally Field to Sissy Spacek. I'm not sure the relation there.
I'm trying to picture it in my head, but I can't do it.
Same thing. It's all the same. Oh, Jesus. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. You know what? Disney's just going to keep fucking pumping them out because obviously Beauty and the Beast has already made gobs of money. So whatever's next, I'm sure it'll make shitloads of money and I'll probably see it. So fuck it. You know.
Yeah, whatevs.
Yeah, whatevs.
You know what's better than Disney movies, though?
What is?
Hip-hop.
Oh, yeah. And anything happened this week in hip-hop that you can bet your ass that Michael's going to talk about?
Oh, nothing happened in hip-hop this week. I'm pretty sure that someone, the King, actually released a track that by itself kind of decimated every other MC in the world. Or maybe I'm just being a little hyperbolic here.
I mean, we're not the experts in hip-hop, so we can only theorize about that. So maybe somebody else who is an expert can tell us about this.
Yeah, I am excited. I want to hear Michael talk about this shit.
Michael, what up?
With first-class legroom, free cocktails for everyone, and a schedule you can depend on.
Hey, what's up? It's This Week in Hip Hop with Michael Burns. It's been like a week and a half off, so glad to be back. Most of 2017 so far, I've mostly been talking about underground artists and artists that are maybe on like minor labels or mid-range labels. We've been talking about a lot of artists that put out incredibly dope hip-hop music on a variety of levels. This week has been the week of kind of mainstream, super famous millionaire rappers doing things. So we'll talk about three of them very quickly. There's a child actor who used to be on Degrassi, which is a Canadian show about a middle school. His name is Aubrey Graham, and he put out not an album, but a playlist. It's called More Life. It's like 84 minutes long. It's really boring. There's some singing. There's some grime. There's a song that's just Sampha, so that's really good. Yeah, man, I just don't get why people freak out about this guy, but whatever. I don't want to shit on him. It's fun. I will say that one of the positive things about the new Drake is that at least he is giving some attention to some really dope artists out of the UK. Like, I'm not mad at more people knowing who Giggs is or Skepta is. And it's really funny because it's created a bunch of memes online where people say, you know, when a UK rapper says they pulled a burner out and it's a bunch of soldiers loading up a cannon. So that's pretty good. So if the biggest two outcomes of the new Drake record are funny memes about UK rappers and more people knowing who Giggs is, then that's a good thing overall. I definitely think listen to some other songs, but overall it's corny. Just a lot of corny stuff. It's really corny. Now, speaking of an artist who has been accused of being corny often, but who I, for various reasons, like a lot, Rick Ross has a new album out. It's called Rather You Than Me. I'll say this in terms of mainstream rap albums that came out. If you prefer Drake's playlist More Life to Rick Ross's Rather You Than Me, I don't understand you as a person or a fan of rap music at all, and I think that you should maybe reconsider some things in your life. But the new Ross album is really good. The production is always like, and there's been a lot of chat on the rap internet about Rick Ross being someone who has an incredible ear for beats, would be an ideal A&R, but as a substandard rapper, I see where that's coming from, because of course production wise on most of his albums, especially this one, the beats are so good. Production wise, it's just like a lush, hard hitting album throughout. It's this sort of beat that just like punches you in the middle of the fucking chest when you start listening to it throughout this album. And I think that's really important. And I think sometimes, to get a little academic about it, I think that sometimes we get over intellectual about the way we break down music, in particular the way we break down rap music. It's why you have these like fucking pitchfork essays where we're learning about, you know, the sub influences of artist X, whatever. But like sometimes music is important because it punches you in the gut, or it hits your head or your heart in a really important way. And that's important. And that's what Rick Ross does. And man, if there's ever an artist out there that like you can listen to that makes you feel like you can get out there and do some shit, it's Rick Ross. But I think it's a good record. I think obviously lyrically, Rick Ross is never going to be a top artist. I think what we do have in Rick Ross that's really important is he's really progressed as a rapper. He's still not great, but he's gotten better, and he's really figured out what his particular pocket is. And even pushing all that aside, his voice is like an instrument unto itself. I can't think, if we had to do like top 5 rap voices, Ross is obviously in that. My favorite tracks from the record, I really like Santorini Greece. It's the second song on the record, production-wise. I mean, you just can't beat it. If that beat doesn't do anything for you, I don't really trust you. I also like I Think She Liked Me. It's the single. It has Ty Dolla $ign on it. That's really good. Track called Scientology I really like, not only because I'm deeply fascinated by Scientology. We can talk about that sometime if you like. And then Lamborghini Doors featuring Meek Mill, really good as well. It's a good record. You know, most of the talk of the record mentions the Meek and Mickey thing that Ross brings up, and also him firing shots at Birdman. That's cool, but either way, it's just a really solid rap album, so you just listen to it. Now, the biggest thing that happened since we've last spoke, Mr. Kendrick Lamar fucking wiped his social media, put up the Roman numeral 4. The next day he puts out a new track, a track in which he takes serious shots at a lot of people. The song, of course, The Heart Part 4. There's 3 parts that have come before it. But The Heart Part 4, Kendrick dropped it. It's good. It has production from a lot of people, including Alchemist. And it's a song that's been perceived in a lot of ways as a battle initiation to men with names like Drake and Big Sean. I think when you look at the lyrics, it's pretty clear that that's the case. I think especially when he says that, you know, you're tiptoeing around my name. You lame. I'm just going to say, I think that's a shot that's directly aimed at Aubrey Graham. There's obviously a line in there where he talks about the Hall of Fame. I think he's maybe shooting a shot at Big Sean right there. But either way, it's really hard, and it's Kendrick. And maybe it's going too far. Maybe we don't need this random track right now, but it's Kendrick reminding all of us that for all concerns, he is the best rapper alive in terms of mainstream rap artist. I saw some interesting discussion online this week about that, and I would never want to say that Kendrick is full stop the best rapper alive, because there's technically rappers out there, especially on the underground level, that do things with syntax and technical structures that are fucking incredible. In terms of someone who is a mainstream artist, it's hard to argue that anyone is as good of a rapper as Kendrick, but it's a really good song. At the end of it, he says that rappers have till April 7th to get their shit together. It's very soon. It's about 2 weeks, so hopefully that means we have a new Kendrick record coming out. And I really hope that this is Kendrick just taking all the steam out of Aubrey's sails. I would love that. But yeah, those are the 3 things that happened since we've last spoke. I think, I don't know, unless you really want to, I don't think there's a big reason to listen to More Life, especially all 84 minutes. Listen around. The tracks with gigs are kind of interesting. Definitely a reason to listen to Rick Ross. New Ross, if you like rap music, and particularly production-wise, it's great. And also, if you need fucking motivation in your life, you want to get punched in the gut and feel like you want to get out there and do something, listen to Ross. And if you care about rap music, you're going to listen to the new Kendrick. But either way, good stuff. Once again, 2017 at this point has been one of the craziest years in rap in quite some time. And like a quarter of the way into the year, on top of everything else we've already had, we're going to have a new Kendrick record. So we look forward to talking about that in the coming weeks. In the meantime, stay safe, do things, do them well, do them with passion, but also eat mostly vegetables, man. We put so much shit in our bodies. So much shit in our bodies. Eat mostly vegetables. Shouts to Austin and Troy. I'm at Mick O'Brien on Twitter. I'll catch y'all soon. Thank you for sticking around, and shouts to the whole Alzadon Nation. It's Michael Burns. I'm out.
Sky as smoothly as a bird, you scarcely realize you are traveling.
All right, sweet. So, Troy, I pretty much think you probably agree with everything he said. Yep.
About Kendrick?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to that, man. I can't wait to... Can Mike do, like, a special, like, 30-minute This Week in Hip-Hop on April 7th? Like, live reaction to whatever Kendrick's doing on that day.
Dude, he should just vlog his experience as he's listening to Kendrick on the bus or in his office or whatever it is, and then just like give live commentary as he's feeling it in the moment when a new track comes on for the first time, or like some new beat drops and you just see him freak out and like throw something across the room because the testosterone spikes.
Yeah, I feel like Michael could do that. We couldn't do that though because we're just a couple of like, you know, white guys, and we'd be like listening to it intently and not reacting. That'd be boring as fuck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would just be a big, I'd just be a big fucking poser if I got excited about it. I would just simply respond to like beats or like some sort of cool lyric that he says, and I'm like, oh, I don't really understand the beef that he's subtly getting himself involved in, but cool.
Yeah, I'm really interested though to find out what it's all about, because I imagine he wrote most of it before the election and everything, even though he name drops Trump in this track. And so I wonder if it's going to be just like a beatdown, or is it going to be more introspective? There's a whole lot of ways I guess it could go.
Well, he may have written much of it after November, right?
I don't know. I would guess they did most of the recording at that point, but I don't know. Michael probably know better than either of us would.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this day and age, they are able to turn out post-production so quickly that I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of it was written right around the turn of the new year. But I don't know. At least in rock music, post-production's pretty easy any day or anymore. Just recording on Pro Tools and shit like that is pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Kendrick's like one of those like 70s rockers who walks into the studio and writes the lyrics, as he's, downing a fifth of whiskey and then recording at the same time.
Fair point. Yeah, that's probably.
Or like Ozzy Osbourne and doesn't even know the lyrics.
Yeah, it just mumbles. Rats heads. I don't know. Because didn't he bite the head? Oh, no, it was a bat. It was a bat that he bit the head off of. He did bite the head of a bat. Is there hip-hop mumblecore? I am sure there is.
Do you think anyone's listening to this at this point?
Nah, no one gives a fuck.
This is the rabbit hole for sure.
What about the new Rick Ross? Did you listen to that one yet?
Man, I mean, I'm not gonna step on Michael because he's the expert, but I can't do Rick Ross.
Did you try this one?
I haven't tried this one. I'm not sure I can make myself. Can you?
Oh, yeah, I can dig some Rick Ross, because it just reminds me of, like, I mean, not like I've ever done this, but in my imagination of, like, popping champagne and doing cocaine on a speedboat in Miami. And that sounds kind of cool. I could get down with that. So if that's the kind of music that puts me into that kind of mindset, then that's cool, man, especially in Dublin here. We don't have a lot of sunshine. Well, lately it's been nice, but, I can just pretend that I'm popping bottles and doing lines of other chemical substances and things like that. Powdered sugar, I guess, is what they use on movie sets sometimes. So, yeah. No, but he does have a cool voice. So I can kind of get down with that.
I'm just glad we can all agree that Drake blows.
Yeah, there were a bunch of really funny memes this week, but I saw one it was Usain Bolt that was ahead of three other people, and the person had Drake in the front as Usain Bolt looking back behind him at the second place person who was Rick Ross, the third place person who was Gold Link, and then the fourth place person who was Kendrick Lamar, and that's how this person had ranked them. So I had to send a picture of that to Michael, and I was like, oh, shots fired. All right, let's wrap this shit up. Moving on to next week. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Owls at Dawn. Hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, owls_at_dawn. Leave us a little message. Tell us what you think. Tell us that you're alive. Show us some love. Give us any recommendations for topics that you want to hear us bullshit about. Give us your best burn on, I don't know, politics. Give us a shout out for single payer healthcare, which is something that is never going to pass, but I fucking want it to pass, and I hope it's going to pass. So let's pretend that it's going to pass, and let's invent that shit, and let's make it pass. And I don't have anything else to say. What about you, Troy?
Mean the fuck out of us. That's all I want to say.
Yeah.
That it?
Yep.
All right, you know what it is.
What up?
Das Vidania Amerikanski.